On behalf of 60,000 pilot-strong membership of the Airline Pilots Association International, it's my privilege and true pleasure to welcome each of you here today. I know I speak for every ALPA member when I say we feel deeply proud to be airline pilots. We respect the trust that the world's passengers and cargo shippers place in us on every flight.
What does it mean to be trained for life? It means flawlessly flying blind, without altitude or airspeed data, on a dark and stormy night. It means maintaining complete control after losing mission-critical systems, landing safely by virtue of training, experience, and raw instinct. It demands the very best of our peers and ourselves, placing the lives of our crew and passengers before all else. Since the founding of the Airline Pilots Association in 1931, we have been fighting to ensure all pilots are trained for life, ready for the unknown, the unexpected, the uncontrollable. And because we are trained for life, we are now living through the safest period in aviation history, a time when we can proudly say we have suffered 0 fatalities due to pilot error, even though more people and more cargo is being flown through more flights than ever before. Most people train to better themselves, to advance careers, to shape their minds and bodies, to explore new opportunities. But we train for the sake of others, to protect. But our mission has not ended, and will not end for as long as we continue to defy gravity. Ever higher, ever farther. ALPA, trained for life.
So that video goes to the very heart of why we fly and why airline pilots fight so hard for safety. We literally are trained for life, which brings me to why we're here today. To recommit ourselves to maintaining the unparalleled safety record of our industry, and that it is experienced in recent times. But also to redouble our efforts in keeping flying safe and secure for the years and years and years to come. I'm pleased to welcome such a strong turnout to this year's Air Safety Forum. As always, the roster reflects an incredible range of individuals representing all aspects of our industry in a deep well of knowledge, skills, and experience. Now, I'm keenly aware that ALPA's commitment to safety is shared by many others. Because of the collaboration fostered by this forum and events like this, air travel has become and remains the world's safest mode of transportation. That's saying something. I invite you to join me for a few minutes in exploring the central reasons behind this truly extraordinary level of safety. These factors also must form the basis of our future work to maintain safety as demand grows and the operating environment becomes increasingly complex, particularly with the inclusion of UAS and commercial space operations. So as many of you know, in the early days of commercial flight, working as an airline pilot was, quite simply put, dangerous. While they were outstanding aviators, each and every one of them, more than half of ALPA's founders died in airline accidents. Half died in an airline accident. As a result, schedule with safety is ALPA's founding principle. Let's not forget, it's also our future goal. Over more than 8 decades, ALPA has learned certain basic principles about aviation safety. One principle is that the most important safety asset on any airliner, passenger or cargo, are two adequately rested, fully qualified, and well-trained pilots. Also, as many in this room understand, airline pilots must be able to control an aircraft in a dynamic and changing environment. Okay, so we routinely perform the expected. We interface with air traffic control. We're constantly checking the current weather and the forecast. We observe how our engines and other systems are performing. But airline pilots also must be able to safely manage the unexpected. As we discussed during our forum panels, whether it's a fire in the cargo hold, a medical emergency, or a disruptive passenger on the aircraft, the list of possible yet truly unpredictable events is nearly endless. So I've been an airline pilot for 28 years. I keep current, I fly the MD-88 as often as my schedule will allow. I've also served as a Navy Reserve F-18 Squadron Commanding Officer. I've flown aircraft with a complement of 3 pilots, 2 pilots, and 1 pilot. And I can tell you that flight operations by 1 pilot are by far the least safe, no doubt in my mind. While airline pilots instinctively recognize this fact because of what we experience doing our jobs every day, the newly released results from a public opinion poll that was commissioned by ALPA shows that Americans overwhelmingly understand this fact. They understand that you don't make flying safer by removing pilots from the cockpit. The American public understands that air travel is the safest mode of transportation, and according to the survey results, they aren't willing to jeopardize their lives or the lives of others just to maybe save a buck. So save a buck or save a life. That's the choice. There's no question where the Airline Pilots Association stands, but there's now no question where the American public stands either. At the same time, some are actually arguing that flying would be safer without pilots. Nothing could be further from the truth. If you're not an airline pilot, you're in luck because you're in a room with hundreds of them, okay? This is your opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of what's required to operate even the world's most advanced airliners around the world. You'll learn that airline pilots must exercise their judgment many times on a single flight. And it's this experience judgment that makes the safety difference, the experienced judgment. The poll results confirm the public believes what most of us already know. Flying will always be the safest with 2 fully qualified, adequately trained, and well-rested pilots at the controls in the event of an emergency. Of course, there are many examples with which everyone in this room is familiar, from the high-profile Miracle on the Hudson in 2009 and the Southwest Flight 1380 safe landing this last April, to this year's ALPA Superior Airmanship Award recipients. But let's think for a minute. Despite these clear examples of how 2 pilots in the cockpit made such a tremendous safety difference, some are attempting to remove them. A dangerous provision inserted into the U.S. House of Representatives FAA reauthorization bill to push for single-piloted or computer-piloted cargo operations. The survey we commissioned shows clearly that the majority of Americans strongly oppose legislation that would eliminate a pilot from cargo airlines. In addition, 80% of Americans agree that 2 pilots working together is best suited to handling an emergency in the cockpit, troubleshooting systems, and dealing with the unexpected. We'll have more details during our midday panel, but it is crystal clear that the flying public simply will not accept the lower level of safety that would result from taking pilots out of the cockpit. On the same topic, Americans also clearly understand that aviation safety is at stake should Congress allow any reduction in first officer qualification, experience, and training requirements. In fact, the recently released survey shows they strongly oppose lowering existing requirements for airline pilots and making flying less safe. ALPA's Trained for Life campaign tells a story of how current pilot qualifications, experience, and training requirements have made flying safer. Since these requirements were put in place in 2010, there has not been a single pilot qualification-related fatality on a U.S. passenger airline. It's quite a remarkable feat. But after a lengthy fight, and it was a fight, ALPA ensured that the recently passed House FAA reauthorization bill does not include any changes to the current requirements. And we've also stopped forward progress of a proposal in the Senate to weaken these safety regulations. We're going to hear this morning from one of our Senate champions on this issue, but I want to be clear. This fight, it's not over. Those who wish to change these regulations are not going away. The Senate is expected to take up its version of the FAA reauthorization in the coming weeks. ALPA is urging the lawmakers to heed the will of the American public and put safety as the highest priority by keeping two well-trained, well-qualified, and experienced pilots in airliner cockpits. On another pressing aviation safety issue, in 2017, the FAA received 1,082 reports of hazardous material events, 1,082. And 479 of those involved undeclared, say it again, undeclared hazardous material. Almost half of them were the result of undeclared material. Urgent action is required to safeguard air transportation from this threat. I'm looking forward to hearing from our keynote speaker this morning to learn how the Pipeline and Hazardous Material Safety Administration plans to move forward to address this serious safety concern. These are only a few of our key priorities as we build on ALPA's legacy of making aviation safer, more secure, and assisting pilots and supporting airline pilots, and ensuring airline jump seats are safe, secure, and accessible. We do have much work to do. But that challenge right there is what brings us together here today. So thank you for joining us here at the Air Safety Forum. We certainly will have a lot of interesting panels and a lot of interesting sharing of information amongst all of us. Thank you very much, and welcome. It's now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, the Honorable Howard Skip Elliott. Skip has been the administrator of the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration since October 2017. While Administrator Elliott's primary experience has been in the railroad industry, he's worked on many of the same important issues we're focused on. Topics like hazardous materials, transportation safety, and homeland security, among others. Those all sound really familiar to me, and I'm sure they do to you as well. Administrator Elliott has more than 40 years of experience in the boardroom. I'm not trying to call you old, Skip, but you have a lot of experience. On Capitol Hill and the state houses and city halls. He's a leading advocate in developing and implementing computer-based tools to assist first responders and homeland security personnel in preparing for and responding to railroad hazmat and security incidents. Now his focus as PHMSA administrator is much broader. It's across all modes of transportation. And his role in ensuring aviation safety when it comes to shipping hazardous material means that he's well positioned to work with ALPA on some of our most important priorities. I had the pleasure of meeting with the Administrator Elliott during his first few weeks as a PHMSA administrator. I'll be honest with you, the meeting was enormously productive. His collaborative approach to reducing the risk to aviation safety is truly unprecedented. This has been especially evident when it comes to undeclared hazardous material. He is a true safety advocate. Please join me in welcoming Administrator Skip Elliott to the Air Safety Forum.
Tim, thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today. Coming over, I couldn't help but think about how lucky I actually am, a railroader who spends most of his time now at PHMSA focusing on pipeline safety, now talking to airline pilots. So if that's not a diverse career, I don't know what is. But again, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. About 9 months ago, and soon after I began the role as PHMSA administrator, I had the opportunity to meet and talk with 6 pilots. This was at a meeting with DOT Secretary Chow, and part of that meeting was how PHMSA would approach its recently assumed duties in the Dangerous Goods Panel of ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. Those pilots were Tim Canoll, Chad Ballantyne, Keith Hagee, Steve Jangelis, Mark Phaneuf, and Scott Schwartz. I'm sure you know them all. And I remember quite vividly that their focus on airline safety and the safety of all ALPA members was razor sharp. Today, I want to express that it's been a genuine pleasure to work with so many dedicated professionals on improving the PHMSA-ALPA collaboration and addressing the risks posed by the shipment of undeclared hazardous materials. As most of you know, and you heard today, I'm a longtime railroader, having lived however many livelong days there are in 40 years. And a few years ago, I would have never imagined myself talking to a group such as this. Making the leap from the perceived bulkiness of the freight rail industry to the sleekness of the airline industry was not something I had ever contemplated, although I had witnessed my former colleague and fellow railroader Oscar Munoz make that transition a few years ago. But when you think about it, I'm here for the same reasons as you, our strong common bond with safety. And from what I've personally witnessed, safety is just as relevant for the engineer at the throttle of a freight train pulling 200 rail cars through crowded cities and towns as it is for the pilot at the controls of an airliner carrying 200 passengers. And I think it makes perfect sense that a safety administrator like me should gravitate towards pilots. Certainly to some it seems counterintuitive that hurtling through the air at several hundred miles per hour, tens of thousands of feet high, in a pressurized tube is the safest mode of transportation. But as everyone here already knows, it is statistically about 100 times safer than traveling by car. I'll take planes any day. And I can tell you that as a confessed safety zealot, I've discovered more than just a few kindred spirits among the pilot community. Clearly, that would not be the case if not for the expertise, the dedication, and the commitment to safety of the airline industry workforce. Airline transportation professionals are clear leaders in the pursuit of both safety awareness and innovation in general, and more specifically when it includes the risks associated with transporting hazardous materials. That leadership and dedication is why PHMSA is the only U.S. safety agency whose responsibility it is to focus on hazardous material safety across all transportation modes, wants to work and learn from organizations like yours. We're currently focused on encouraging the implementation of integrated safety management systems in the oil and gas energy sector, and that's something that your industry has been doing for a long time. And overall, the safety operations under PHMSA's purview is very good, delivering energy and other hazardous materials essential to our daily lives without incident more than 99.999% of the time. But when incidents can result in tragedy, very good is just a gentle way of saying not quite good enough. One of PHMSA's most consistent and important messages is that achieving zero incidents is not impossible. There are a number of other safe enterprises, such as pipeline and rail, where the transportation risks are also heightened by the addition of hazardous materials. But airline safety is one of the very few enterprises with a safety record that exceeds the others. Our future safety successes lie at a very thin margin. But airline safety performance illustrates that even a higher safety success rate can and should be attained. How pilots relate to the inescapable risks of their job is a big part of the reason why. And so we in the broader hazmat safety business would be foolish not to look to organizations like yours for guidance and leadership. Innovation is a key part of that leadership and is a necessary element of further safety improvement beyond that current 99.999 level. I recently was reminded of that in conversation with Captain Joe DePete, ALPA's National Safety Coordinator, who highlighted that a shift from forensic to risk predictive analysis in flight safety resulted in an 83% decline in airline industry fatality rate over a 10-year period. Shortly after that first meeting with ALPA and Secretary Chow, our two groups met again to discuss in more detail the growing concerns about undeclared hazardous materials that are ending up on passenger and cargo aircraft. One observation was that this issue was not just isolated within the airline industry, but that potentially harmful effects caused by undeclared hazardous materials had impacted other commercial transportation means as well. Out of that meeting emerged a number of good ideas, one of which led to PHMSA to host several facilitated intermodal working group meetings designed to further assess the depth and breadth of the issue. The sessions included participants and our colleagues from the Federal Aviation Administration, the Federal Railroad Administration, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. One of the many good recommendations that emerged from those meetings was the need to quickly provide greater industry and public awareness about the hazards associated with undeclared and improperly packaged hazardous materials. Closing the undeclared hazardous materials gap is a matter of some urgency. And as you are all aware, lithium batteries are among the items all too commonly shipped without designation as dangerous commodities. For example, the significant consumer demand for lithium batteries has resulted in rapid expansion in their production, supply, and proliferation. In fact, so much so that lithium battery production capacity is now set to double by 2021, according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance. The lack of comprehensive hazardous material regulations for the carriage of lithium batteries as cargo on board commercial aircraft, coupled to the lack of industry and public awareness on the rules governing their shipment, pose additional risks across multiple transportation modes. And so in response, the Department of Transportation is rolling out an important new safety awareness initiative called Check the Box to address these shortcomings. Cruising altitude certainly is not the place to discover that you're transporting hazardous materials. Shipping these items without proper designation, packaging, and handling instructions puts people's lives at risk. In many cases, people shipping hazardous commodities are unaware that their package is going to be on board an aircraft, which makes it unlikely that they will have packaged or prepared it as safely as they should have for that leg of the journey. Through Check the Box, we hope to achieve greater public industry awareness of common household items that are classified as hazardous materials and how to safely ship them by educating industry and the public through some new dedicated content on PHMSA's website, the use of social media, and participation at safety events. To that end, we've created some new dedicated safety messaging and a catchy new icon named Hazmat with 2 T's, I might add. And we'll be rolling out this initiative at other safety forums and major transportation events throughout the country in coming months. I hope and believe that such a safety outreach and education effort will, as Captain DePete said, close a glaring gap in safety protocols and save lives. And let me reemphasize, this important new safety initiative would not have become a reality if not for ALPA and its commitment to improving safety. I'd like to close with one very important point. PHMSA needs your help. Progress in pursuing the last tiny fraction of safety is unlikely to come through more perfect rulemaking or better enforcement or any other regulatory function. While regulation is a core function at PHMSA, but we know that regulation alone will never result in reaching the goal of 0 accidents. Such a maximum goal will never be achieved by setting and enforcing just minimum standards. To do that, we must rely on more powerful things than regulation: collaboration, communication, innovation, teamwork. And as PHMSA administrator, I've encountered few groups more receptive to that observation than ALPA. I know there are many good reasons that the aviation community is considered the very zenith of safety, and that ALPA will help get the Check the Box Safety Awareness Initiative off the ground. I'm also confident that we'll find many other ways to work together that can yield tangible safety results. Thank you for your time today. This has been a true honor and pleasure for me. Thank you also for your unwavering commitment to safety, and I do look forward to working with you all again. Thank you.